What's up, single players? J. Scott Brown here for Only Single Player, and today's topic of discussion is story in military shooters. Specifically, what has caused such a dramatic increase over the last few years to make the story in military shooters so strikingly similar? When did this phenomenon actually start to occur? And finally, is there anything we can actually do to address the homogenization of this genre? If I was to describe to you a first-person military shooter that's known for its explosive cinematics, modern-day setting with minor futuristic themes, and action-packed rollercoaster ride gameplay segments, what contemporary military shooter would I be describing? The answer is, well, there is no one answer. That's actually a loaded question. The description I just gave you doesn't uniquely identify any one particular military shooter, as it loosely describes pretty much every popular military shooter that's currently on the market. All of the most recent derivatives of Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, and Battlefield have featured story modes which stick to the same tried and true formula. The protagonist is usually a relatively silent soldier that's not ranked highly enough to have any real authority, but isn't ranked lowly enough either, so much as to be disrespected. The character tends to be completely devoid of all personality, only electing to speak up, that is, if they speak at all, during cutscenes where they simply reaffirm the motivations of other, more important characters in the plot. The enemy forces, typically possessing some ethnic background that is alternative to Western lifestyle, has undergone war with the United States to subvert their freedom and democracy, making them overtly malicious and removing any resemblance of their humanity. Enemy soldiers tend to serve as cannon fodder as the player navigates between cutscenes, the gameplay mostly acting as a bridge from Cinematic A to Cinematic B. And perhaps the strongest thread that's weaved between the majority of military shooters is that they all tend to glorify war in a big way. Games like Call of Duty portray warfare as sexy, accurately fitting the description of the phrase war porn. This is very similar to the way war is depicted in Hollywood action films, with popcorn movies such as The Expendables serving entirely as ways of satisfying our need for thrilling and intense depictions of combat. The Expendables movies have made this very obvious, as the story, which is a basic tale of triumph and camaraderie, is largely and purposefully overshadowed by the extraordinary circumstances of war, which involve massive explosions, intense and surreal firefights, exorbitant amounts of weaponry, and did I mention explosions? Video games began adopting this approach to military shooters with what's considered to be the most iconic modern first-person shooter of all time, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The first Modern Warfare game was one of the first single-player military FPSs to depict war from a contemporary perspective. Previous military shooters more showed war from a historical view, electing to mostly focus on World War I and II. But it wasn't this novel take on combat which made Modern Warfare so memorable. In fact, it was such a fantastic success because it applied the same formulaic approach used in Hollywood action movies, featuring intense firefights and action-packed sequences that were sure to get the blood flowing throughout the campaign's entirety. But that was a new method of designing an FPS story 8 years ago. Now, it's all we ever seem to get in modern military shooters. The majority of them all tend to glorify war in such a surreal way that it sometimes can almost be a little immature. All modern military shooters over the last 8 years have done this, with the exception of one. Spec Ops: The Line is the singular exception to the rule. Prior to its release in 2012, it was quickly dismissed by both critics and consumers alike as another tried and true military shooter. To be fair, the game was definitely marketed as such, the trailers mostly being supercuts of explosions and firefights. However, after its release, it was made very clear that Spec Ops: The Line is the antithesis of a typical Hollywood military shooter. The game portrays war in the most genuine way possible, reprehensible, unappealing, depressing, all things that aren't particularly enjoyable to think about, but are extremely important questions. Spec Ops makes no effort to glorify war or condone the player's actions. Instead, it constantly berates the player for causing such anguish, almost satirizing the current state of military shooters. It responsibly demonstrates the abhorrence of warfare and respects the emotional maturity of its audience. All of this is accomplished via a story that has layers and characters which have a significant amount of depth to them. The focus is on their struggle and remains on the despicable nature of war throughout. Does Spec Ops tell a better story than other modern military shooters? Absolutely. But is it actually more enjoyable? Of course not. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with the Hollywood approach to game design. I personally adore the Call of Duty franchise, and I love their ability to create such adrenaline-filled, action-packed moments which resonate. There's no problem with this methodology. However, it started to become more and more egregious the more saturated the market becomes. If every modern military shooter is aiming to be more of a cheap action fix than an actual depiction of war, then we are unfortunately failing to take full advantage of the gaming medium. It's ultimately about balance. Both styles of storytelling can coexist, just as long as they're appropriately balanced with one another. And it's to that extent where I do feel that modern military shooters are in desperate need of diversifying. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my take on the current state of more modern military shooters at the moment. If you have anything you want to add, if you agree, if you disagree, if you're neutral, please reach out to me on Twitter, leave a comment in the comment section below, or tweet at @OnlySinglePlayer, as I'd love to hear any of your feedback. But that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Please like the video below, please subscribe to Only Single Player, and I'll see you next time.